First, let me tell you a little bit about myself. My name is Alexander. I am 16 years old. I work as a programmer in a small company about 5 years ago. At first I worked as a delivery guy, then I started to develop in the field of administration. Anyway, this summer, in July 2014, I took a vacation and wondered where I should spend the rest of the summer. There were many options, but I was drawn to my coach's tempting offer. The thing is that on July 12th, before my birthday, there was going to be a 12 children's open and intercity karate competition. I forgot to tell you, I've been doing karate since I was 7 years old with my teacher, an old friend of our family. There was a prize waiting for the lucky winners, a trip to camping. Guess who won? Not me, of course. Awarded the bronze medal, I was released in a bad mood. It was silly to say that the opponent had not fought fairly, because that was just an excuse. I knew my own worth, so I accepted the award with honor. But, seeing my sorrow on this subject, my coach spoke to the judging committee, and 2 days later I was on my way to camp. Having thanked Vyacheslav Leonidovich in advance, I called my closest friends and offered them to go together. Predictably, no one refused. The journey was exactly 3 hours. I decided to get to the next town by bus, as my uncle's car we all would not fit, and to go with my mom. Well, I'm an adult. Buying each ticket, I crammed into the back of the car, and, with my nose plugged into a tablet, began to look for interesting material to read. I will not tell you how we got there, but everything is clear, not without incident, and Sasha bag we took from the hands of a supervisor at the terminus. It had already gotten dark. Buses don't run here, and it was 3 to 4 kilometers to the camp. For me it was no obstacle, but Taya quickly got tired and, having told us about her intentions, retreated into the bushes, having left her bag on the road beforehand. Deciding to take a break, we settled down by the side of the road, waiting for my sister in a ride. Unbeknownst to us, we all fell asleep. Apparently, the journey was too exhausting. As I cast a stern look at the sleeping companionship, I realized a wonderful fact. An hour had passed, and still no Thailand. I decided to start looking, and looked reproachfully at my friends. They were asleep and probably didn't care anymore. I went on my own. The bushes were not so small. There was a small grove hiding behind them. Scared and realizing the seriousness of our problem, I rushed back up the road. There was no one there. Absolutely no one. I realized everything and slowly began to despond. I was alone with the road and the forest, and who knows who else. Maybe they decided to play a joke on me, but when 10 minutes had passed, I realized there was no time for jokes, and I rushed forward along the road into the darkness. After running a good 100 yards, I looked back. Nothing, absolutely nothing. Just darkness and a strange emptiness. The blackness was thickening on the road, beckoning me strangely toward it. Remembering the experience of past such adventures, I decided not to go there and continued running. How much longer I ran, I do not know, but finally I saw the gate of our camp. It was beginning to dawn. Thinking that when looking for my friends would help me a lot adults, I decided first to ask for help from the guards of the camp, and then go to the administration. But there was absolutely no one there. The gate was closed, there was silence all around, and through the bars I could see the scene. On it were the usual for all scenes: microphone on a tripod, a table, and some kind of container. Without giving it much thought, I decided to get into the camp and find out what was really going on. As I squeezed through the rusty bars of the fence, I met my first danger, a dog. The guard dog, an ordinary mongrel on a chain link, growled furiously at me. I backed up in surprise and sat on my butt. The dog kept barking, which gave me a strange sense of the presence of someone or something other than me. And this something made itself felt. In a few seconds, someone's hand fell on my shoulder. Hiccuping and at the same time rushing forward in surprise, I ran deep into the camp. When I reached the first building, I ran inside in a hurry, out of the corner of my eye noticing the strange creature that was following me. When I reached the 3rd floor, I ran into the first room I could find and locked the door. After catching my breath, I decided to look around the room. There were 3 beds that were arranged in a T shape. On one of them lay a bag, which I immediately examined. The bag contained food, a screwdriver, headphones, and girls' clothes. The clothes weren't new, and they smelled musty, but the food was strangely preserved. 2 sandwiches and a piece of meat made me look strong and brave again. I must have been overjoyed by my recent lunch and decided to open the door. And for nothing, that strange creature was just coming up the stairs. When it heard the noise, it began to roar wildly and rushed across the hallway toward me. Barely managing to lock the door, I assessed the situation. A short young man of strong build, had to stand against a huge humanoid creature with a mask on his face. Having decided to fight the wild creature, I was still aware that the forces were a little unequal, and, remembering the screwdriver, I rushed to the bag. I unzipped the zipper and started throwing everything out of the bag, getting wildly nervous and rushing myself. The door was cracked, and an inhuman greenish-gray eye was staring at me through it. Bang, another crack, and still no screwdriver. Soon the door would come off its hinges, and I still hadn't found it. I'm not going to make it. That's when I got mad. With all my might, I kicked the door in the lock area. It flew out, knocking the creature off its feet and falling on top of it. The ledge above the door shattered into pieces, and I broke off a large splinter the size of a knife and began to shred the creature. I was beginning to like it. I was piercing the soft layers of the creature's flesh with the splinter, leaving endless splinters in its body. I was bringing him pain, and I loved doing it. But, remembering that I'd come here to seek help, not to fight the strange creature, I kicked it sharply and ran for the stairs. Even as I ran outside, I could hear groans. It was that thing moaning. Apparently, I'd done a pretty good job on it. But my pride and joy passed quickly as I saw hundreds more of these creatures walking across the camp toward the enclosure. A little startled, I ran back into the building, closing the main door. It probably wouldn't stay closed for long, so I decided to look for a fire exit as soon as possible so I could get my ass out of there. One day the family decided to take a break from city life and went to the forest. In the woods, as always, it was nice, fresh air. As they were driving, they paused because a cart was passing across the road. The family wasn't interested in it, they were just going to rest. As they pulled into the wooded area, they decomposed themselves. The children climbed out of the car and momentarily ran to play hide and seek. When everything was finally covered, the father called out to his children. They came running in and started eating what was spread out. "Yeah, the air is fresh. We should come more often," the father said. As long as they sat there, they weren't bored, but it was getting dark and they had to look for lodging for the night. As they drove along the road a little ways, the children screamed they saw a building. It was a hotel. Their father parked the car and rang the doorbell. A bald man of large build came out. Everyone said hello and went inside the building. They took off their clothes and looked around, and it was clear that this was a cheap hotel since they could see that it was not in the best condition. In addition to them, there were many other people there. They were passing through and saying hello as well. The man showed them where they would be staying the night. The family was very tired. They went to sleep. The father looked up when he heard noises. It sounded like someone was whispering near their door. "Maybe theirs," someone whispered. The reply was not clearly audible those later. My father was frightened and went down the stairs. There was no one on the first floor, but the stench was unbearable. It was coming from the basement. I had to check. It was very dark in the basement, but it was for the best that there was a light switch. My father pressed it curiously. It was a horrible picture. There was a table in the middle, and someone was lying on the table. My father decided to get closer and saw that it was a body with a circumcised abdomen. This body was still breathing. As he leaned his palm against its neck to check for a pulse, he wondered how a person could hold on like that. Suddenly someone grabbed his father's leg. He was very much frightened. It was a strong grip. It was a body that was alive. It said with a dying voice to my father, "Go away." My father must have been a brave man and dared to look around this whole room. In fact, there were several tables there. There were plates on those tables, and in the plates were the entrails of people along with a spoon. It was not hard to guess that the owners of this hotel were eating people. The father ran upstairs and saw that bald man. The man asked him what he was doing here. The father didn't answer in fright and ran upstairs to his family. He opened the door and rushed to his wife and children. It was clear they had been taken by the two men who had whispered a few minutes ago. All he had to do was find his family. The room was empty. We should have gone back downstairs to take a full look around. The father didn't think long and went back to the basement. There was the man there. At this moment he was finishing off the remains of the corpse's organs. The sight was nauseating. "Where's my family?" shouted the father. The man continued to chew quietly. After the father repeated his question several times, the man turned around and offered to eat those organs. The father angrily grabbed him by the shirt and pushed him against the wall. The man smiled and didn't want to say anything to him. The father was very angry. He grabbed his fork and held it to the man's neck, but the strange man continued to smile. It was as if he didn't care what his father said. He could hear the sounds with his ears, but he didn't want to get into it. Serenity played a game with death, where death won. The father clenched his fork and stuck it in the man's throat. The man, also smiling, fell to the basement floor. "Kill everyone who gets in your way," was heard in the father's head. He couldn't stop himself. He stabbed the man with a fork as if he had killed before. The father wiped his face and found a kitchen knife. Taking it, he went to a nearby wooden cabin. That cabin was near a hotel, which meant someone had been there, and there were lights in the windows. It was nighttime. It was like a real horror movie. For a moment, my father forgot that this was not a movie. Upon reaching the door, my father had to kick the door in. The father tried to kick the door with his shoulder and his foot. Those two heard someone knocking and ran away. When the father got to the cabin, the first thing he saw was the same table, only bigger, and there were the bodies of his wife and children. There was a shotgun lying by the door. The father loaded the shotgun and noticed that there was a secret entrance to the cabin. Those men must have gone in there because they were afraid of my father. He went in there out of hatred for everything. It was a little dark in there, shouting, "Where's my family?" He shot all over the walls. People tried to hide, but he found one of them, grabbed him by the back of the head and ripped out his left eye with his other hand. Then he put the muzzle in his mouth and pulled the trigger on the shotgun. Then he kept shooting the body over and over again. The father himself didn't know what was happening to him. He already had 2 murders to his credit. Dad was usually a calm man. He helped people who needed help. He could protect a defenseless person, but now he had just turned into a monster and didn't understand what was happening to him himself. But he couldn't stop. He seemed to have been hiding it all his life. If they hadn't gone to the countryside yesterday, maybe things would have been different, but that was fate. My father reloaded his shotgun one last time and noticed he was out of ammunition. Suddenly, the same maniac attacked my father, grabbed him by the neck and started biting him. His teeth were very sharp, you might even say vampire-like. He tore off a piece of meat. His father was furious and broke his spine, after which he fell and screamed in pain. His father grabbed him by the bone and pulled it out completely. That's when 3 murders came to his account at once. This time he came to his senses. Back at the hotel again, the father noticed flashers reflecting off the hotel windows. It was the hotel residents who called the police because the basement was open. That's where they found those bodies. The father went into the hotel and saw police officers standing there, who turned around and looked him over carefully. Frightened, he ran into the woods. Father didn't know the woods, and something abruptly changed in his mind. He was no longer in the woods. He was back in that hotel, in that basement. Only there were pigs in place of people, and in that cabin they were slaughtering pigs too. There was a kitchen there. The father shuddered, turned around and saw his children and wife. He was covered in blood. The father didn't understand what was going on here. Everyone was watching as the man slaughtered the pig. When the wife saw this, she called the mental hospital. They came and took him into their white kingdom. Sitting in his straitjacket, he smiled. He understood that this was not really happening, but there were actually corpses in the passing cart.